Oh God, he showed up inside the hospital again. The scream shattered the snowy Alaska night. An intruder with a rifle stormed into the recovery ward, a stray bullet burying itself deep in the concrete ceiling. But in an instant, Nurse Brooks' small frame, hair damp with sweat, spun around and snapped his wrist with a strike so precise it sent chills down the spine. The rifle clattered to the floor. The hallway fell silent. And then, as her blouse slipped, the tattoo of the Northern Hemisphere and a string of coordinates blazed across her back. A nurse bearing the secret seal insignia? Could she truly be who she seems? And why hasn't the ghost of Icefall disappeared? The hospital curtains still swayed after the impact of the intruder being thrown down. The hunting rifle lay sprawled on the floor, its barrel still hot, the smell of gunpowder mingling with the cold, antiseptic air of the recovery ward. For a few seconds, everyone stood frozen like statues. Only the wind outside howled, reminding them the world kept turning, while this place had just been cut away from its normal rhythm. Elena Brooks said nothing. She inhaled slowly, her shoulders tensing and then releasing. Her eyes didn't fix on the man lying crumpled, nor on the stunned faces around her. She only pulled her disheveled blouse back into place, a motion both natural and as if rehearsed for years. But in that moment, a part of her secret slipped into the light. The tattoo of the Northern Hemisphere, numbers arranged in a curve down her spine, numbers cold and sharp, like gashes cut into the ice. Marcus sat in a corner. He had only meant to bring patient files to check on the night shift, but now his blood felt frozen. His hand trembled on the papers, the edge of the map damp with water tapping faintly against the metal table, a small sound that rang loud in the silence. He recognized that sequence of numbers instantly. Not because he had ever been good at geography, but because it had been carved into his memory for 13 years the day his father vanished on the Alaskan ice. From his parched throat slipped a single word as thin as breath: Icefall, 2010. Elena didn't answer, but her eyelids closed, and darkness swallowed her. Inside, memories crashed together like shards of broken glass. The frozen desert winds scoured her face. The MH-47's rotors screamed like a mountain collapsing. The metal frame shuddered, then fire bloomed, devouring the pure white of the ice. She remembered the blood-soaked hand gripping her shoulder, the commander's ragged breath. If I fall, let it live on your back. Not a command, not a plea, but a testament passed down like an heirloom. Elena opened her eyes. The room returned cold. Still yet her heartbeat pounded in her ears like rotors that never stopped. In front of her, Marcus had spread the old map across the table. The paper was blurred from damp, the folds frayed, but his shaky red ink stopped exactly at the coordinates etched on her back. His eyes couldn't hide the desperate belief, as if he had just found the only door that could lead back to his lost father. In the thick air of disinfectant and dread, silence became a third presence in the room. Elena turned away, avoiding that gaze. She had buried her memories long enough to believe they would remain forever under the ice. But memories never die. They only wait for a crack to surface. And today, that crack had split open, clear as footprints on fresh snow. The hallway outside was still buzzing after the gunshot, but in this room no one dared break the quiet. Marcus bit his lip, his hand gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. He said nothing more, but his eyes spoke louder than words. They said the whole team died. But these coordinates match. You know something. You're still holding what's left. Elena rose and walked slowly toward the window. Outside, snow fell thick, the yellow glow of a street lamp casting a stage with no actors. The chill seeped through the glass, touching her skin. But nothing was colder than the memory buried for 13 years. No coat thick enough to hide the tattoo, no distance far enough to escape the past. Her eyes met her own reflection in the glass, the calm face of a nurse. But at her nape, the mark that could never be erased. A piece of history inked into her flesh, with no way back. If Icefall truly didn't exist, Then why did her back bear those exact coordinates? And who had given the order to bury the truth beneath the ice? And now, dear viewers, pause for a moment to hit subscribe before we continue with the heart of this story. Only if you truly feel the weight of what I'm sharing here, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to see people from everywhere joining us. The Alaska night fell thick, like a blanket smothering every sound. Outside the window, wind lashed against fogged glass, carving pale white streaks like cracks across ancient ice. In the small apartment, the glow of a tablet screen lit Marcus's face, hollowing the eyes of a man who hadn't slept. He couldn't sleep. After what happened at the hospital, every nerve was strung like wire, and when the body refused rest, the mind went digging. From the declassified file he had kept for years, page after page appeared, the sterile smell of the hospital still clinging to the air. The official report was chillingly brief. MH47 crash. All KIA. Beneath it, 12 names, each marked dead on the same day. No notes, no further investigation. 12 lives reduced to 12 red strokes on a page. Marcus swiped his finger across the screen. Inside him, anger and grief bled together like black ink spreading across ice. He'd heard people say war always left pages meant to be erased. But when your own father was one of those names, erased was no abstraction. It was a wound carved into flesh and bone. He opened the NOAA satellite images he'd obtained through an old friend's internal account. What appeared was not the endless white the report described. On the frozen expanse stretched a long burn scar, the helicopter's rotor having torn into the ice like a wound that would never close. And at the edge of the photo, impossible to ignore, a metal container half buried in snow. Marcus zoomed in. His heart pounded, the way a child's might when stumbling onto a clue left behind by his father. Tracks emerged, drag marks across the snow, heading north, away from the wreckage. He sat still, a faint smile breaking through, so bitter he didn't notice it. Anyone watching him would have thought he'd lost his mind. Who smiles at finding ghost footprints after 13 years? But to him, it wasn't a satellite glitch or a trick of weather. It was proof, enough to believe not everyone had died at icefall. Marcus printed the photo, trimmed it, and slipped it into the file. His hand shook, not from the cold but from the collision of fear and hope. In pencil, sharp and slanted as if to keep himself from breaking, he wrote, "They said all died, but you carry what's left of icefall." The next morning, dim sunlight pierced the hospital hall, refracting through the heavy snow into fragile beams. Elena Brooks opened the supply cabinet. A small note slipped out, landing on the floor like a memory refusing to stay buried. She picked it up. Her hand trembled, not from fear, not from being exposed, but because the old rotors roared suddenly back in her ears, dragging smoke, fire, and screams under the snow. Her body went cold, but inside her chest, an old wound tore open. She stood frozen for nearly an hour in that supply room, surrounded by boxes of gauze and jars of antiseptic. Her eyes closed, and Thomas appeared. The youngest in the team, eyes still sparkling even in a blizzard, grin teasing the squad. He had once shoved a dagger into her hand, half joking, half serious. "If I don't make it, you carry my number on." Brooks unlocked the drawer in her memory, and that memory was real, because in her tiny apartment deep in a wooden box at the back of a closet, the tag still waited etched, with the number 29040. No name, no rank, just a code, a reminder that someone had died so she could keep walking. Her fingers brushed the cold steel engraving, and her chest tightened. Some wounds don't bleed, yet every time memory shifts they seep again, slow and endless. And now, Marcus's note had blown open the door she'd fought to lock for 13 years. If those footprints in the satellite photo were real, then who had left them? A ghost from the past? Or a truth the Pentagon itself had buried under ice? Late afternoon, Anchorage was swallowed by a sudden snowstorm. Gray clouds stacked like steel plates, dragging winds that clawed at every VA hospital window pane. The power flickered, fluorescent bulbs stuttering until the hallway looked like an old film reel, frames flashing light dark light, making anyone who walked through feel uneasy. In that flickering light, 3 figures appeared. Russian parkas zipped up to their throats, footsteps heavy as nails driving into the cold tile. Beneath the thick fabric, the butt of an AK-74 scraped against their sides, betraying a metallic rasp that couldn't be hidden. They didn't speak, didn't glance at signs like lost patients. Every step carried the rhythm of men trained on a range measured, sure, never wasted. No one in the hospital noticed right away. The storm was enough to throw people off balance, but Brooks did. A special operator's instincts never die. As she stepped out of the supply room, she caught a strange undertone, the whisper of parka fabric brushing steel. To most ears harmless, but to hers, it screamed louder than an alarm. She peeled off her medical gloves and tossed them into the bin, just another routine gesture. Instead of heading back to the pharmacy desk, she slipped into the dim records room. The iron door closed softly, the old lock clicking as if acknowledging her decision. Inside, a faint yellow bulb lit a battered steel cabinet. From it she pulled a gray field shirt, frayed at the hem but still holding its military shape. On the shelf, a black steel folding knife waited, no serial number, no origin, but balanced to the gram. Ordinary to anyone else, but in her hand, it rang like a bell waking the past. Outside, bootsteps echoed closer. The blizzard had severed communications. The hospital's cameras clicked, then went dark. The whole building felt cut adrift, an island in a sea of raging snow. The first man appeared at the end of the hall. His eyes swept quick, predatory. The gun glinted under the sputtering light. Before he could pull the trigger, Brooks's compact frame darted forward like a shadow. A clean hip twist bone cracked. He collapsed, rifle tumbling into the air, landing perfectly in her grip. The gun turn was so fast, anyone replaying it would swear she'd trained her whole life for that moment. Without lingering aim, she leveled at the second man. The shot rang out, bullet biting into the wall beside him, enough to rattle him, send him slipping to the floor. A different seal might have put the round straight through his forehead. But Brooks chose less blood, a strange mercy amid chaos. The last one staggered back, eyes wide like a deer caught in floodlights. His hand shook, weapon pointing but powerless. Brooks didn't let him recover. She surged forward, body curling into a spin. A kick slammed into his ribs, flinging him onto a pile of gurneys. Metal clanged, then silence. It all ended in 15 seconds. While the storm outside howled, the hallway was utterly still. Doctors, nurses, patients, those still conscious, held their breath. 3 armed men now lay crumpled like phantoms swept in by the wind. And Brooks stood at the center, hair loose and damp, sweat glistening at her nape. She tugged her blouse straight, accidentally exposing the tattoo of the northern hemisphere running her spine. The flickering light made the numbers blaze for a heartbeat. A young doctor stumbled up, chest heaving like he'd just escaped a dream. His words broke out in a gasp. "God, who are you?" Brooks lifted her face, calm as ice. A flicker of a smile thin as a scratch on frozen glass. Her reply, short and sharp. Closing the chapter as quickly as it began. Just doing what had to be done. The aging security cameras still recorded, but the storm had severed the feed. Every moment, every scrap of proof, was trapped inside these walls, in the memories of those who saw it. And they would carry that silence, though none of them knew for how long, or who those men really were, or why they had come hunting in a place filled only with wounded veterans and nurses. All right then, my dear viewers, if you're still here and finding this story gripping, drop a comment with a 1 or just write "I'm still here" so we can keep going together. News of the hospital assault didn't take long to leak. A corridor turned into a miniature battlefield, 3 intruders knocked out cold, cameras recording but cut off from broadcasting. For FBI Anchorage, it was a bureaucratic nightmare. Emergency reports, alarm systems triggered, and a barrage of questions demanding answers. But the deeper they dug, the more every path was blocked by a cold red stamp. CIA. Classified. 2011. The Icefall file was an open record. It was a slab of stone sealed tight. After hours of failed attempts to breach the archive, one FBI agent set down his coffee with a weary sigh, muttering like a man pronouncing a verdict. "We're not allowed to touch this." Marcus refused to accept that. What he had seen with his own eyes, Brooks taking down 3 armed men in 15 seconds. The strange tattoo carved into her back was proof enough that Icefall wasn't fiction. And when truth is hidden, there's only one option: go around the wall. He tore through his laptop, pulling up a hidden link to the NOAA data vault. Among thousands of jittering radar images, his eyes scanned for even the smallest anomaly. Night bled into morning, the storm whistling outside, his fingers raw, until it appeared. A flicker of code across the screen, almost like static. PD-07. Marcus jolted upright. He had heard his father mention it once, only once, in a vague conversation before boarding that doomed flight. PD-07, a name scrubbed from every report, a jamming device so powerful it could blind every radar in a region. A machine banned after Afghanistan, its fallout too dangerous to control. He printed the data, shoved it into his bag, and rushed straight to Brooks. In the narrow room, yellow light pooled over her shoulders, her face carved from stone. Marcus dropped the file onto the metal table. Brooks glanced at it. No expression, no questions. Just silence, heavy enough to hear the wind clawing at the hallway outside. Then her lips parted, not to explain, but to release a secret locked too long. PD-07. That's what we were guarding at Icefall. A nuclear detection device. And the same thing that nearly killed the whole team. The words hung in the air, heavy as ice. Marcus swallowed hard, while Brooks lowered her head, memory flooding back. In her mind, Icefall wasn't just a research post on the ice. It was 12 people forming a circle of survival around a lifeless machine. The device had arrived sealed inside a steel container, triple-coated locks. Their mission: protect it. But no one was allowed to know why. The only order was absolute: never let it fall into enemy hands. The night the MH-47 exploded, PD-07 was triggered. Its signal blasted so hard it severed all communications across the sector. No one could call for support. No one could send a distress signal. And in that chaos, the helicopter burned like a torch against the ice, swallowing her team whole. Brooks drew a long breath, fingers brushing the nape of her neck where the coordinates burned like a live ember. It wasn't just a mark of location, it was a scar carved into her soul. Marcus saw it and didn't need words to understand. The cramped hospital room turned into a cold interrogation chamber. On the table lay the half-finished declassified file, beside a smudged note. One question hammered in both their minds. If PD-07 had truly been banned, why was it at Icefall, and why had the CIA sealed the entire truth away? The gray C-130 ripped through snow clouds, dropping onto the Anchorage military airstrip against the howl of the Alaskan wind. 2 days after Marcus sent the data packet, a man descended the stairwell, tall frame, hair streaked with silver, uniform crisp as though the cold didn't exist. Colonel Jonathan Reed, NORAD. A name once whispered in his father's old stories, usually paired with a half-smile and the line, "Reed knows things no one dares write in the reports." Now he was here, flesh and blood, not legend. And his eyes, when he entered the cramped VA hospital conference room, carried the weight of years buried deep. The meeting room wasn't grand, just a battered table, scuffed wood, a yellow bulb swaying overhead. Yet the air inside was so tight that each breath echoed like steel being struck. Marcus sat beside Brooks, struggling to hide his tension. Reed, moving with deliberate slowness, set the case file on the table, dropping a block of truth too heavy to ignore. His voice rolled out low and heavy, shaking the room without raising volume. Ghost 12 was deployed to guard PD-07 at Icefall. That wasn't rumor. That was the mission. Marcus swallowed hard. Brooks didn't move, but her shoulders trembled. As if the words weren't just facts, they were a bell tolling the ghosts under the ice. Reed flipped open the file, calloused fingers drumming lightly on the page. The official report was wiped from the system. That I know. But here's the worst truth. We never received a distress signal. All comms from Icefall were severed, as if someone deliberately cut them. The air thickened. Marcus stole a glance at Brooks. In her eyes, pain shifted, no longer frozen silence, but ignited flame, devouring memory. Her hands clenched tight, knuckles white. Reed paused. He didn't dress it up with rhetoric. He only looked at her, the look of one soldier to another. If you're still alive, then the truth still has a chance. At that moment, Brooks was stripped bare. Years of hiding behind a nurse's coat, tattoos buried under fabric, sidestepping curious stares gone. In front of a senior NORAD officer, she wasn't a nurse. She was who she had always been at Icefall. Ghost 12. Marcus's pulse thundered. He had never seen his father in a moment of decision, but now he realized Brooks's face carried that same reflection. A survivor, bearing the testament of her fallen team on her back. Reed exhaled, gaze drifting to the window where snow poured thick. He knew better than anyone. If Icefall was unearthed, it would touch a slice of history many in the Pentagon wanted sealed forever. Yet he also knew if those fragments weren't spoken, the next war wouldn't begin in the ice, but here at home. In the silence, only the storm hissed through the cracks. Reed turned back, pressing his heavy hand on the file, as if stamping an unspoken order. Brooks closed her eyes. In her mind, the last words of her commander echoed, moments before the helicopter fire consumed them. If I fall, let it live on your spine. She opened her eyes and met Reed's gaze. No oath, no promise. Just a look. And Reed understood she was ready. My dear viewers, are you still with us? Take a pause, grab a glass of water, then settle back in. If you find this story gripping, drop a comment with a 1 to let me know you're here. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Night blanketed Anchorage like a heavy shroud, wind howling through abandoned window frames at the city's edge. Beneath the ground, inside an old warehouse sealed since the 82nds, Brooks sat alone. A small oil lamp flickered, its trembling light revealing fine dust drifting in the cold air. Before her rested a weathered wooden box, hinges rusted yet still guarding secrets more than a decade old. Her hand quivered slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside, relics emerged, like broken bones of a past that would never heal. A tarnished dog tag, the numbers 29040 deeply etched, caught the glow of the lamp. It once hung on Thomas, the youngest of Ghost 12, the awkwardly smiling soldier who always cracked jokes to break the silence on the ice. Brooks ran her finger across the digits, the chill biting her skin as though his spirit lingered still. Beside it lay an old photograph, edges frayed. 12 faces, 12 smiles frozen in a fleeting moment before the mission. The white glare of snow reflected the sun, and behind them loomed the massive steel container PD-07, the very machine they hadn't known would bury their fate. Brooks stared until the faces sharpened, then faded into shadows. Finally, a torn scrap of map, its paper yellowed with damp, marked in shaky red ink the coordinates of Icefall. That trembling stroke was drawn by her commander himself, before pressing it into her hand in his final moment. Brooks inhaled deeply, the air tinged with rust and damp wood. The bunker was as cold as a tomb, and everything in that box felt like restless ghosts. But she knew, the time for hiding was over. Footsteps echoed down the concrete hall, slow but distinct. Marcus appeared at the doorway, his face pale from cold and strain. He didn't need words, his eyes said everything. But when his voice finally broke, it trembled like a man on the edge of an abyss. "If you know, please let me come. I need to know how my father died." Brooks lifted her head, locking onto his gaze. For a moment Marcus's face blurred, with the memory of her fallen commander, the same resolve, the same burden in his eyes. Pain interwoven with hope. She stayed silent, weighing a choice that could reshape both their futures. Her hand closed the box. The lamp's glow cast their shadows long and trembling across the rough wall. Brooks gave a slight nod. No promise, no grand words, just the nod of someone who had once walked out of hell's frozen gates alive. In the silence, she rose, clutching the torn map. Her voice came rough, almost a warning. "Tomorrow, but on the ice, no one hears you scream." The oil lamp flared, painting her face with a red shimmer. Marcus understood. He had just crossed the line from a son's desperate search for truth to a journey reopening the gates of Icefall. Outside, the storm roared again, as if Alaska's ice itself knew the past was about to be unearthed. Would the return to Icefall bring truth, or awaken ghosts that had never truly slept? Dawn in Alaska didn't arrive with sunlight, but with the slow fading of darkness. Snow still fell thick over the military runway, blanketing every trace. A UH-60 thundered awake, its blades shredding the frozen air, whipping up a white cyclone around the fuselage. Brooks walked forward, parka hood pulled tight, her eyes unwavering. Beneath her coat, a small wooden box was bound with leather straps, not luggage, but memory. Marcus followed, his pack far too big for his frame, stumbling clumsily until he nearly slipped on the ice. For a fleeting second, the awkward sight drew a faint laugh from Brooks, an emotion so rare it felt foreign after all these years. Reed waited, officer's cap shadowing half his face. He asked no questions, gave no speeches, only handed Brooks a freshly printed map and a comms card. In the roar of the blizzard, his gravelly voice carried just one line: "Don't let them turn Icefall into a ghost again." The UH-60 lifted, the fuselage shuddering. Marcus gripped the seat, throat tight, staring down at an endless shroud of snow, cold, vast, and secret as a burial cloth. Brooks sat still, fingers wrapped around dog tag 29040, as though Thomas were beside her, laughing at Marcus's stiff, clumsy posture. The helicopter pushed north. Cracks in the ice slowly sprawled below scars of the earth. Each fracture pulled Brooks back into the sound of screaming rotors, the shouts of her team, and fire spreading across white ground. Marcus watched quietly, knowing every twitch in her expression carried 1,000 untold memories. Hours later, the helicopter dropped low. Below stretched a flat white plain, in its center half-buried steel containers. Icefall, the base the CIA had sealed, the name scrubbed from every record. Wind screamed, freezing skin raw, yet the truth was surfacing. They stepped down. Marcus sniffled, tugging at his windbreaker, muttering that Alaska deserved the title, God's freezer. Brooks smirked faintly. In a land of death, humor was the knife that cut the weight. Before them lay remnants, a shattered rotor blade, welded into ice, a long charred scar, a wound that never healed. And farther still, faint tracks trailing northward, the very footprints that had haunted Marcus in satellite photos. Brooks knelt, pressing a gloved hand to the ice. The cold pierced bone. Beneath it, she heard echoes, oaths, gasps, voices calling each other in chaos. She closed her eyes, letting the wind lash her face, as if testing how much truth she could still bear. Marcus stood behind, eyes flickering with fear and resolve. He knew if they followed those tracks, they might uncover a secret that could rewrite the new Cold War. He also knew they might never return. Brooks opened her eyes. In that moment, her face was no longer a nurse's, no longer a survivor in hiding. It was the face of Ghost 12, the witness to truth, the bearer of a legacy carved into her spine. The evening wind tore across the ice, flinging snow into a blinding shroud, as if nature itself tried to bury Icefall's secret. But some truths cannot be buried. Elena Brooks, the last survivor of Ghost 12, had returned to the place the world believed erased from maps. At her side, Marcus carried the eyes of a son searching for his father, and the fear and resolve of a generation that had never known war, yet bore its inheritance. The story closes here, but the journey does not. Ahead, the old footprints still led north. Who had left them? Who had survived? And Phoenix Dawn, the name blacked out of files, had it truly ended? Or was it waiting for its return? Those questions would open the next chapter, where the line between truth and lies, life and death, was as fragile as the ice beneath their feet. But before we move forward, there's one truth worth pausing on. Survival isn't just luck. It's a burden, a responsibility, and also a chance to tell the story of those who didn't make it back. Ghost 12 is not just a memory. They are a reminder that sometimes the greatest legacy a soldier leaves behind is not a battlefield victory, but a lesson for the next generation about loyalty, about truth, and about the strength of memory. If you're watching this video anywhere across America, whether from the crowded streets of New York, the frozen forests of Alaska, or the quiet small towns of the Midwest, share it with a loved one, a friend, or a veteran you know, because maybe, just maybe, they need to hear a story that reminds them the pain doesn't make them weaker. It's what gives them the strength to stand. Leave a comment. What do you think awaits Brooks and Marcus at Icefall? Do you believe someone else survived? And if you want to walk with us into part 2, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video, because sometimes what keeps souls from disappearing is the fact that we still remember to tell their story.